Be creative, innovative, passionate. Be excellent, inspiring, driven. Be faithful, disciplined, prepared. At Union University, you will thrive in a Christ-centered community and be equipped for success in your life and career. Begin your journey today. At Union University, be transformed.
Students of the world, gather round. It's time for the World Student Podcast with our host, Mark and Darren.
And welcome once again to the World Student Podcast. Darren Sutherland and my co-host up in New Jersey, I think is where he's located today. Who knows, he may be out traveling the world, spanning the globe. Mark Kopinski. Mark, how are you, my friend?
Morning, Darren. I am in New Jersey. My wings have been clipped a little bit, so not a lot of travel as of the middle of June here.
Yeah. Do you miss the travel, Mark? Or you kind of enjoy working out of the office?
No, I do miss being on the road. And, you know, a big part of student mobility is getting to these countries and visiting with students and families and, you know, universities and all the other constituents in these places. So this has really curtailed what we do. I mean, you can do things certainly over the web now and sometime more efficiently than, you know, going places. But there's nothing like being together with people and sharing culture and ideas. So I'm hoping we're going to get back out on the road here maybe in August at the earliest, it looks like.
Well, there you go. Hey, the date of this recording is June 17, 2020, and we want to thank our friends at Union University for underwriting this podcast and all that they do. Dan Griffith and the folks, and you'll hear from somebody from Union in just a bit on today's podcast. But first, first, Mark, when I say Dan, it's early because we're going all the way across the globe. And with the World Student Podcast, you never know where we're going to end up. We've been to India. We've been to Australia. We've been to the Philippines. We've been to the Czech Republic and Vietnam. But, Mark, I'll let you introduce today's guest and his background, and then we'll just go in straight from there.
Well, thank you, Darren. Listen, I think the best thing to do is to have Dr. Osborne introduce himself. He's a very, very interesting gentleman, originally from Ohio, has spent a lot of time in China, speaks the language and understands the culture just about as good as anyone, I think, in the U.S. today. Dr. Osborne is a senior administrator at a company called iPerk based in Columbus, Ohio. And I'll turn the mic over to Justin and let him introduce himself and his company and what they do in the field of student mobility. Justin, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Mark. Thank you both so much for having me today. I'm very excited to be here. It is early, but I got my coffee, so I'm definitely ready. Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll just introduce myself and iPerk a little bit. I'm actually from a very small town in southern Ohio, the Appalachian part of the state. So it's very rural, very poor, not a lot of diversity or anything like that going on. Went to college, my undergrad down there at Shawnee State University, which is a state university right on the border of Ohio and Kentucky, right on the river there. And my goal was to go into environmental engineering, and I studied that. But after a couple of years, I ended up studying abroad. I went to Spain, and that was really just a life-changing experience for me, to experience that new culture and to live a life that was different than the one that I grew up and to see all these things. So I really kind of transformed myself on that trip. And so I got very involved in international student education. So I started working at the International Student Office there at Shawnee State. And eventually I was able to, I heard about a scholarship from the Chinese government to study in China. It was a very good scholarship. We might talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I got the scholarship to study comparative education at Beijing Normal University. A lot of people these days, they don't know really what normal university is, but it's a colloquial term to mean kind of what we would call today a teacher's college. It's a university for education, and it's one of the top education universities in the world. It was ranked number 33 by the QS rankings for education. So I went there. I ended up doing my master's and my PhD both in China. I studied the critical thinking and transformative learning among study abroad students, comparing the different experiences between Chinese and U.S. study abroad students. And I learned the language while I was there. Very, very hard language. I didn't speak it at all. Took a lot of time. I always tell people, I could probably, I probably could have a doctorate just in the amount of time I've studied Chinese, because it takes a long time to get it. And for the past 2 years, I've been with iPerk. I came back from China in 2018, and I've been in iPerk ever since then. iPerk, it's a great company. We were founded in 2012, and for most of that time, iPerk was very much involved in high school projects and building high school relationships. Big F1 student program, bringing students from China over to the United States who want to study in high schools. And iPerk has student coordinators set up throughout the entire country to help the students, and they support them throughout the entire process, from the time they apply to go to high school in the United States, all through the application process, and then even when they're accepted, and eventually when they graduate. iPerk student coordinators are there supporting them the whole time. So that's one of our biggest programs. Our biggest program in terms of just the number of students, we do a lot of educational camps where we bring students from China to the U.S., different cities. We've had camps at BYU, at Ohio State, a lot of different high schools, Columbus Academy, one of the best high schools in the United States. And they take classes, so it's educational, and they learn the language, they learn the culture, they get to see some sites. We take them to big universities. A lot of these kids, they want to go to the top universities, so they really love the chance to see them when they're here. We also work to connect schools in different countries, so mostly United States and China, but we work with some other countries as well. We have what's called a sister school program. So we connect the school with, say we have a school in the United States and a school in China. We'll connect the students and teachers. They can write letters back and forth, introduce themselves, take videos, share their culture, share what they're learning, and eventually, hopefully, work on some education projects. We've done some pretty amazing things between the schools. They've worked on roller coaster design, 3D printing, and underwater robotics. That's another big thing that we do. We're very much involved in promoting STEM education, and we are the China regional organizer of the MATE competition, which is one of the largest underwater robotics competitions in the world. And we had a very, very successful MATE competition last year, sent a couple teams to the international competition. This year, obviously, we weren't able to do that. So, but we definitely hope that will pick back up next year.
Hey, Justin and Darren, just to give the audience some idea of the magnitude of China and the impact China has on higher education in the U.S., 370,000 Chinese students studying in our American universities as of today. It's about 150,000 of those students at the undergraduate level. There's around 100,000 in high schools as well, which Justin's very familiar with. That comes out to about $15 billion to the U.S. economy. So this is, of all the countries we've been talking to, this is the #1 sending country in the world. And we send 12,000 American students to China to study as well. So, in terms of shows, this is the big one, as they say, Darren.
Yeah. As I'm sitting here listening, Dr. Osborne, and I'm trying to bring all this together in my mind this early, because let me ask you this question here. What is holding back American students? Because Mark just quoted the numbers. There's a huge deficit. There's a huge number of Chinese students in America, but there's probably 1/10 of that amount of American students in China. What's holding back the American students from going to China and going over programs kind of like you did, and getting your master's and getting your doctorate and that sort of thing in China?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and there are a couple reasons. And actually, if you would have asked me this question 10 years ago or 8 years ago, I would have said we're on the right track, we're going there. But we're getting a lot of students interested in studying abroad, and particularly in China. But that has changed a lot in the past few years. So previously, there was always less, of course, students, and it had to do with both the education systems in both countries. The United States does have a lot more high quality universities. That's something that's changing. China is really growing there. And economically, there was much less incentive to go get a degree in China, and also they couldn't speak the language as well. But China really went very far to kind of promote internationalization of their universities, and a lot of those students were coming from the U.S. That was one of their biggest groups. But in the past few years, with declining relations, that has really changed, and there's really been a shift of focus. And you've seen that in the universities. When I first went to China, it was in 2012. Most of my classmates were Western students, and Americans were the most. Now it's predominantly, you're looking at nations that are China's very much economically involved with. So African nations, nations that are part of the Belt and Road Initiative that China's put forward. That's their economic policy for growth in the region. So Central Asian countries, that's kind of where the growth is happening right now. And a lot of that's political. So unfortunately, that's the case. And I don't see that changing unless there's a change in policy between the countries and relations get a little better.
Mark mentioned earlier, Dr. Osborne, $15 billion in revenue on the 500,000 students in America. What would you say to that admissions rep, that director of admissions person at that small college or large or medium-sized college here in the States that wants to purge into the Chinese market? How should they start? How should they start looking into that?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. So it's certainly gotten harder lately in the past some years, because not only, as I mentioned, for U.S. students going to China, it's gone way down. The number here, Mark mentioned the number, it is still a lot. The number is actually still growing, or at least it was, but it's leveled off a lot. Last year, the number of Chinese students coming here only increased by just over 1%. A few years before that, it was increasing by 7, 8, 10% every year. So that number is going down tremendously. So it's becoming much harder for universities to recruit international students, and especially Chinese students. And so what I would say is you have to be creative. You have to really think outside the box in terms of international Chinese student recruitment, because unless you're a top-ranked university, you're going to have some difficulty. So a lot of people are doing different things. One, you want to think about, you're recruiting not just the student, you're really recruiting the parents even more so, because the parents are so important for the Chinese student. They have such a long history of filial piety, and if the parents don't agree, then it's probably not going to happen. So translate your material. A lot of people think that Chinese students, they can all speak English, so it's not necessary, but the parents don't generally. So make sure you have translated material. A lot of people are hiring people in the country. So if your university hires somebody there, that will help, because most of the universities that are lower tier here, Chinese students have never heard of. The parents have never heard of. They've only really heard of the top ones. They've heard of some city universities, perhaps, but they're not. Most universities in the U.S., especially the lower tier, are not well known. So make sure that if you have somebody there, or you're working to promote your university there. And there are some other ways that you can do this. I think for these lower universities, probably building partnerships with Chinese universities. This is something we've really been pushing, because it is going to be hard to recruit, and more so, especially with the virus. So if you can build a partnership with a Chinese university, that creates a pathway for students to go to your university. This is what we've seen has the most success. And I know Mark has worked with other universities that are doing this. We're working with universities to do this right now. It's very difficult navigating the Chinese regulations, because they are very tough. I would recommend working with somebody, of course, like an organization, to do so. But get creative, think of different ways, transfer agreements, other type of programs like that. So the old ways are changing. That's kind of.
Hey, Justin, can you give us some idea? I mean, when you say hire someone in China, walk us through that a little bit. What is the cost of doing that? How do you manage that person? And then, what are they doing when they're there working for, let's say, a union college, representing them week to week in country? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, there's a couple ways that you can do it. What some universities are doing is just hiring a person to work for them directly. So, say Union wanted to hire somebody that lived in Shanghai, that person would actually be a Union employee. They'd be on the ground, right? So they could be working with a lot of the agents in China, a lot of the schools in China, the universities. They could set up meetings for union officials either online, or if union or the university wanted to go visit visit China. So really, they just are there to promote the university in country, because the biggest factor they're going to face is that for these lower universities is they're not ranked, and they've never been heard of by a lot of Chinese parents and students. So having somebody there just helps to put the word out for your university, and hopefully that will increase the reputation and the word of mouth to get more students. Now, if you're working with an agency like iPerk, then it's much easier because you have a huge network. We have a huge network in China. We're set up in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and we also have a huge network here in the United States. So it's much easier to do all of those things and to connect with more people. A lot of universities are hesitant to work with an agency, but I think it's going to be the way a lot of universities are going to have to go in the future.
Mark, you sent me some information on some stats earlier in the week, and as I'm looking at them, we're all smart enough to realize with the current political climate that Chinese admissions into this country is going to flatten out. Okay, of those students coming over, what are they looking to study, and what areas of study are these Chinese students looking to get into?
Well, Justin mentioned the STEM fields. They are by far the largest if you're grouping academic programs, either at the undergrad or graduate level. So, certainly engineering, technology degrees, biology, chemistry, medicine. Um, these are the growth areas both in the U.S. and in China. This is, where the future of most industries is headed one way or another. Students want to be exposed to top quality institutions that have, faculty and facilities that are going to propel them out of those programs and into a career. The U.S., as we've talked about in the past, has a very strong after university education / industry program called Optional Practical Training, OPT for short. So almost 70,000 Chinese students participating in that program, which allows students, especially in the sciences and technology areas, to stay in the U.S. for an additional 3 years after they graduate from an undergrad or grad program, to work with companies, gain more experience, and ultimately perhaps work for those companies and stay in the US under a different visa category. And even for the students that are going back, it propels their career in all directions with multinationals, government organizations, non-government organizations. So that's the biggest area academically, Darren. Business is probably not too far behind. And then I think as Chinese students, parents get to know the vast education marketplace in the US and the amount of choice here, you're starting to see students mature and go into other areas, social sciences, the humanities, um, you know, academic programs that may not come to mind as quickly, even the arts and movie making and these kinds of things. So Justin, maybe you could highlight with the students coming out of your high school programs beyond STEM. I think we all know that science and technology are big, but what are you seeing in some other areas, social science and humanities, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, you're right. The large majority of our students are still studying STEM related field and business field. Because as I mentioned, it's really, it's a lot of the decision is up to the parents. So, and if you ask your parents where do they want you to study, they probably say just, oh, see what the top job is and then study that. So that's still what we're seeing by far, is the biggest. I think psychology has been one that I've been surprised. I've seen more Chinese students going towards studying psychology, which is, what probably you didn't see as much several years ago. So yeah, I think that's certainly a field that's coming into the, Chinese students are choosing more and more, and they're going with just the regular sciences more and more too, like biology and chemistry, things like that. But I think things are changing slowly, as you said, but we're still, the vast majority of students that I'm talking to are studying the STEM fields.
All right, white elephant in the room question, guys. Here we go. These U.S. universities, they want these Chinese students in their classes. They want these Chinese students, enrolling in school. Where is the financing for the Chinese students coming from? Are the parents viable in paying for it? Are they looking for financial aid? What's happening in that direction, Justin? Because at the end of the day, it's all about who's stroking the check. So, that's probably not the most educational way to put it, but it's just the meat and the fat of it, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. That's totally true, and that is one thing that you will see if you look at the numbers on this. That's one of the biggest differences between Chinese students and a lot of other international student population is who's paying those bills. So a lot of students from other countries are really the biggest focus is on financing, tuition. Is a scholarship available? Is any type of financial aid available? But for Chinese students, it's mostly the ranking, the university. The cost is much less expensive. So I actually know the stats on this. About 90% of Chinese students are self-funded, meaning that their parents are paying their entire bill. So, 90%, I don't have the numbers on other students, but I'm sure that it's much, much lower. So when you're talking about,
Yeah, it's about half, Justin.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. So the demand is there and the capital to pay for it is there in the Chinese student population.
Wow. Wow.
Darren, I think, just to interject, and I know this isn't a political show, but it's kind of hard to avoid this, especially in election year. As I said earlier, this is a $15 billion import for the U.S. And, to Justin's point, many of these universities rely on these full pay or close to full pay Chinese students to provide scholarships for other students from other parts of the world, or even American students that want to access and come to their universities that can't without a scholarship. And a lot of the other programming on campus is also funded by these Chinese students. So, we're looking at a situation where if a Chinese student is not already in the US, meaning they're graduating from one of Justin's high school programs and they're still here, or maybe they're at a community college, or they're just finishing an undergrad program, going to a graduate program, it's very likely that no Chinese students coming from mainland China will make it to the US this September, regardless if our universities are able to open on-campus programs or not, which means they'll either be studying online, and Justin can talk about the dynamics around studying online from China, or they're going to be delaying their journey to the US to January or perhaps 2021, or God forbid, they're going to be staying home or going to another country, maybe closer, like Australia or something like that. But this could be a mega impact to universities' bottom line. If this were cut in half to, $7 or $8 billion, you can imagine the ripple effect at big and small institutions and for our economy as a whole. Justin, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, but I think it's an important point to be made.
Yeah, I think one thing that people don't really realize is how much a lot of these universities rely on Chinese students. We tend to think that the Chinese students are mostly going to the coast, the California system, or up in the Northeast, the NYU, and those are big numbers for Chinese students. But if you look at actually the universities that have the highest percentage of Chinese students as a proportion of their entire international student population, the top 5 schools are all Midwestern Big Ten schools. You got Michigan State, Ohio State, Illinois, Purdue, and University of Michigan that all have 50 to 60% or a little higher of their international student population are just Chinese students. So they really rely on these students. And yeah, we're going to see big changes. Australia, they've already started. They started their semester a little bit earlier. They're already down to about 56% of their Chinese students didn't come. So just imagine what that's going to be like. So going to really have to adjust and just accept that this is going to be a down year.
Well, and Darren, you have a couple of liberal arts colleges down your way, just outside of Atlanta, that have, incredible Chinese enrollments. Close to 100 Chinese students at a school that is, 1,500 students strong. And
Yeah,
Wesleyan
down around
American student is paying, 30 to 35% of that tuition bill, and the Chinese student is paying 100% of that tuition bill. You can see what a big impact economically this is going to have.
It's going to have a huge economic impact, and we hope it worked out. Justin, how many of these students, when they come to the U.S., end up staying in country and making the United States their permanent residence? And what's the percentage that go back to China?
Oh, that's a good question. And the thing about it is, I've seen the surveys on this, and that percentage is actually dropping as well. So in the past, you saw about 49% of students would say that they intended to stay longer. And get more experience, and maybe even try to make the U.S. their permanent residence. But that number is also going down, and now we're seeing a little more than half, I believe, was what I saw recently, of the number of students saying that they intend to return back to China as soon as they complete their degree. So it's around, the numbers of students wanting to stay it's still between about 40 and 50% of them intend to stay, but that number is decreasing. And as we mentioned, the political situation, there's a worry between the relations between China and the U.S. There's also been a lot of government policies. Mark mentioned OPT. There's been policies threatening that, and it's getting harder for Chinese students to stay here. And we're seeing that in their opinion polls as to whether or not they even want to stay.
Nice. Justin, let's talk a little bit about American students going to China. And we know with the current climate, it's tough with the COVID-19 thing we're facing. Travel between the two countries is virtually stopped. But let's just assume COVID-19 wasn't a part of the equation at this point. Let's talk about U.S. students for a little bit going over to China. How would a U.S. student start his breakdown and his determination on what school to check out, where to check it out, where they need to go, and what would they do? Tell us.
Sure. So China really in the past 20 years has made a big push to push their universities into the global rankings, right? They had this project called the 985 project. It was announced in 1998 and in May, so it's 98 May 5, so Project 985. And the goal of that was to just really invest a lot of money in their universities. And there's been 10 universities that they've invested over $1 billion in to help rebuild their facilities, to promote conferences, to internationalize the faculty and internationalize the student population. So start with those universities, Project 985. And if you're looking for the best of the best, China has what's called the C9. That's essentially the Ivy League of China. It's the top universities. And by far the top universities in China are Tsinghua University and Peking University, or Beijing University, Beida, as it's called. So those are the top universities. If you want to find out opportunities to go there, check out the CSC. It's the CSC scholarship. It stands for the China Scholarship Council. They have a lot of government scholarships that they give out. So even though as I mentioned, there's less and less Americans, those opportunities are still there. And there are still some Confucius Institutes in the United States around a few universities, but you may have heard a lot of them have been shut down, either by.
Justin, you want to say something about those, what they are?
Sure, yeah. So part of this 985 project, in a lot of the money they invested was to increase international students. So what's the big problem with international students coming to China? It's the language issue. So they were not able to study in Chinese because they couldn't speak Chinese. So they tried to solve that in a couple ways. One way was putting a lot of English programs in. So a lot of master's and PhD English programs started popping up at major Chinese universities. And another way was to try to get Americans or other students to learn Chinese. So a lot of universities would develop Confucius Institutes that were funded in large part by the Chinese government to teach kids Chinese. So they could go there, they could learn Chinese, and there would be a lot of scholarship opportunities called the Confucius Scholarship. So if you study Chinese for a year at the Confucius Institute, you could get a scholarship to go to China to study Chinese. But as relations have become worse between China and the US, a lot of them have been shut down by the Chinese government. The United States government has put a lot of pressure on universities to also shut down these Confucius Institutes. So there's much less Confucius Institutes than there were 5 years ago.
What if you were? Let's just go back in time for just a second, Justin. And you're that person in Ohio again, and you're looking into China. And what topics, what studies, what educational field should a kid in the U.S. be looking for in China? Yes, we know language is a big one. If you want to teach Mandarin back in the States or something like that. But we've heard that a lot of Chinese students come here for medicine, engineering, and so on. What do U.S. students attend college in China for?
The biggest thing is the language to learn Chinese, but you're actually seeing these universities rise up in the rankings in some other very important fields. The highest ranked university in China now is Tsinghua University, and that is actually the #1 university in the entire world for engineering related fields. They're #1 in civil engineering, #1 in overall general engineering, #1 in computer science. They're #3 in mechanical engineering, #2 in electrical engineering. So a lot of these engineering and those STEM related fields, you're still seeing the US universities ranked higher, but in those specific fields of engineering, the Chinese universities are really booming. So I think that's going to be the next wave. A lot of students are going to be going to Tsinghua and Beida and taking engineering.
Wow. What you got, Mark?
Well, just to play off of that a little bit, I know the Chinese government is putting a lot of money into this area. What beyond the money are they attracting faculty from around the world as well to teach in these schools, Justin? Because one of the hallmarks of U.S. higher education, whether it's a small school or a smaller school like Union or Harvard, is they also have faculty from around the world, and they're able to attract these bright people to their institutions to teach. Are these Chinese top institutions doing the same?
They are, yes, they are. So part of Project 985 was also to allocate resources for internationalization. So when the real goal of the 985 project was to take these universities and push them up the rankings. And I don't want to say kind of game the system, but they were very aware of what factors go into the equation of university rankings, right? So part of it is your percent of your student population that's international. That's if you have a higher percentage, that increases your ranking a little bit. And the same goes with whether or not you have international conferences and hire international faculty. So that has been a very important. They've invested a lot of money to hire international faculty. And so I met many professors who were in the United States. Maybe they had a little bit of difficulty finding a professorship here, and they went to China and they had jobs in very good universities. And that's something that I think if you're out there listening to this and you want to be a professor, but you're having difficulty finding a position here, check out China. They have a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of universities there. They're trying to internationalize their faculty, and I think it would be a lot easier to get a position there than it would here, and you would build your experience in case you wanted to come back. So definitely internationalizing the faculty is a big part of their plan there.
What's the cost of living differential between the U.S. and China?
That's a good question, and that's very much depends on where you are. If you are in Beijing, it's very expensive to have a place to live there. So, I mean, you're talking a bedroom in an apartment that you share with 3 other people is $1,000. Oh yeah, absolutely. So rent is very expensive. But then you have things like food, which is very cheap. Food is cheap. Anything that involves a service, so you have somebody working for you is going to be very cheap. But then anything that involves space, that's what they don't have a lot of is space. It's going to be very expensive. But if you do want to go there and you get a scholarship or a job in China, then your scholarship will pay for your place. So.
What are some, we hear on the news and we see through documentaries and different programs, major U.S. companies investing in China and growing in China, even at the retail and the restaurant level. If you, being someone who's lived there for an extended period of time, was standing up in front of a group of students in America and said, these U.S. companies are making an impact in China. You want to work in China for a U.S. company. Who some of those companies students should look at?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a very good question. But I would say, it depends on what field you want to go in, of course. China is very protective with their labor market, unlike the U.S. I mean, well, the U.S. is certainly less protective. But if you're interested in going into tech or anything related to software or engineering for a major tech company, they're almost non-existent in China. There's very few of these companies. China has been very protective of their own industry to make sure that only their companies are succeeding there. So we all know things like Google. Google is blocked in China. Facebook is blocked in China. Twitter is blocked in China. And it is very difficult to get a job at one of their competitor organizations in China. So like China has a Twitter called Weibo. They have a Facebook, Weixin. They have all these things, but it's going to be very difficult for Americans to get in there. I would say the biggest field, education is huge there. If you want to teach, doesn't even matter what subject it is, but if you want to teach, it's very good. It's very easy to get a job there.
What about our Fortune 500 companies? Coca-Cola, UPS, Delta, Walmart, things of that nature.
Guys, I just interject a point here, especially as it relates to study abroad and why this is so important and why China, really should be at the top of the heap. Even if you're not going to live in China, let's say you're there for 3 months on a study abroad or something, the important thing is to understand the culture, the mindset, the consumer. Certainly the language would go a long way to help this. But the reality of it is when you come home and work for any of those companies you just mentioned, Darren, or really any company selling anything, with 1.4 billion people, it is the largest consumer market in the world by far. And you're going to be wanting to sell your product, whether it's an airplane or a car or a cup of coffee, you name it, you're going to want to get into that market and sell that product. And if you go to China, you'll see a lot of our big brand companies there. I mean, there's a Starbucks pretty much on every corner. Certainly Coca-Cola has a huge market share in China. It's an important brand and beverage. So, the point of going to these places, Justin studied in Spain and in China. I lived in the UK for a long time, is to understand the culture, the language, and the people so that you can do business no matter where you end up, working and living later on. And, I would further say, because I know we're going to do segments on some of the other top sending countries as well. I mean, you're looking at China, India, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Canada, and Vietnam as the top 6 sending countries in the world right now. We've already talked about Vietnam, and we'll get into, and we did India too, as a matter of fact, didn't we? We'll get into some of the others later, but if you combine those 6 top sending countries, you're talking about $30 billion to the U.S. economy. So this is big business, any way you look at it. As big as many of these other industries, we're discussing. And if we don't know something about China, a lot about China, it's going to be very difficult to compete in the future.
Justin, we got to get out of here. Before we get out of here, tell folks how they could get a hold of you if they need help, or for any student that's looking for assistance, how they could find you and your company, and how they could get to China, or the kids from China can get here.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're interested in doing anything in China, whether that's teaching or going to China, or if you're a Chinese student wants to come here, or if you're an administrator in a university and you're interested in doing some cooperation with China and attracting international students, check us out at www.iperc.org. It's iperc.org. You can email me. It's Justin Osborne at iperc.org, OSBORN. And yeah, we'll help you out or give you some advice.
All right, Justin, real quick question before you leave us, okay?
All right.
I got to make sure I can get a job in China one day. Do they have country music radio by chance over there? I mean, you're from Appalachia. You had to listen to country music when you were in China, right?
Oh my goodness. You would not believe country music is the most popular form of music there. It really is. Anytime you go into a coffee shop, they are playing country music.
So I could get a job in China, no doubt, being a DJ, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
There you go.
It's funny you asked that, because that's true.
There you go, Darren. You're set. See, you can teach old dogs new tricks.
Absolutely. We'll start a band if you go there. I'll play guitar with you.
There you go. There you go. Thank you so much, Justin, for joining us. Mark, as always, it's always fun to catch up with you, my friend. And thank you once again for listening to the World Student Podcast, brought to you by our friends at Union University in Jackson, Tennessee. For more information about Union University, check them out online and give them a shout.
Thank you for listening to the World Student Podcast. For more information on how you can be a part of this podcast and information on international student recruitment, email us at worldstudentpodcast@gmail.com. And please leave a remark in the remarks section. This podcast was a production of BG Podcast Network. Jonathan Giles, producer. Jacob Sutherland, director.
Be creative, innovative, passionate. Be excellent, inspiring, driven. Be faithful, disciplined, prepared. At Union University, you will thrive in a Christ-centered community and be equipped for success in your life and career. Begin your journey today. At Union University, be transformed.